Hey everyone, it's Brett, and we're back today with another great author chat. Our guest is the author of several award winning and best selling fiction and nonfiction books, including The Metropolitan Affair, The Windy City Saga, The Mark of the King, and The Five Love Languages Military Edition, which she co authored with best selling author Dr. Gary Chapman. She has won numerous Christie Awards, gold medals from the Military Writers Society of America, and the Golden Scroll Award from the Advanced Writers and Speakers Association. She's a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution and serves as the executive board of her local chapter. So stick with us as author Jocelyn Green of Bethany House Publishers discusses her newest historical fiction novel, The Manhattan Confessions, coming up next. Don't go away.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts Podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
All right, Jocelyn, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we get started, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about you? Where do you live?
Yeah, I live in a charming little town called Cedar Falls, Iowa. It's right in the middle of the country, and I live here with my husband and two kids who aren't really kids anymore. They're 17 and 19, and too many cats, although it's the right number for us.
You're a cat people, huh?
I grew up with dogs, but we transitioned to cats, and we find that they have a lot more personality and affection and lower maintenance than we ever imagined. So we're sticking with cats for now.
Okay, I'm a Chihuahua person. We've always had Chihuahuas, like little short-haired Chihuahuas, and it's so funny. The Chihuahuas they have Great Dane energy, but they are 5 pounds of don't mess with me.
Oh my gosh, so funny.
Yeah. Tell the listeners, what does a day of writing look like in your life?
Yes. So if you had asked me 2 years ago, it might be a little more interesting because I was a full-time author and speaker up until that time. Now I have a day job. I am also the operations manager at my financial advisor's office. So all numbers during the day. And so my writing, when I took that job, I thought, I can just write at night. I'm a little bit fried by the end of the day. So my writing life is really on the weekends and on my days off. Sometimes I take vacation time. So when I do have a writing day, it starts with devotions in the morning and a lot of tea. Tea will power me through it. And by the time I sit down at my desk to do the actual writing, I have already planned the scenes that I want to write. I've already kind of outlined it. I know what needs to happen so that I don't really spend time wondering what's going to happen next. When it's a writing day, I just write for, I try to do like 4,000 or 5,000 words in a day.
Yeah. Okay. So what made you choose to go into a day job rather than doing it full time?
Yeah. So I had been doing full-time writing for years, like ever since my son was born, and he's almost 18. And now that child needs to go to college. So writing is a very fulfilling job, but I found that I worked all the time at it, and I got paid twice a year, which is normal for traditionally published authors. And I never knew what I was going to get. And that's not really a great way to contribute to the college fund. So I've branched into independently publishing a few of my things. I got the rights back to some of my earlier books. So I get paid a lot more frequently for those. But it was just a practical, logistical thing. And I'm grateful that my employer was so gracious when I took the job. I told him I'm still on a book deadline. I still have to get this in, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. And he said, well, just bring it to work. And when you have downtime, you can work on the book. So,
that is so
he
cool.
knew that when I had my laptop out, I was working on a novel, and he was okay with that as long as I would still answer the phone and get my own work done. So he's been really understanding. And now that book deadline is passed, who knows if I will, still do that type of thing. For now, I'm just hoping to be able to keep it to the weekends.
I've talked to several authors on this podcast, and a lot of authors, they do work outside of it. Is so hard to make a living in writing books. Do you feel like there's not as many people that read these days as did, say, back a decade or two ago?
I would say that the types of things people are reading have changed. People spend a lot of time reading social media. What
They
if we
do.
took the time that we spent scrolling on Facebook and Instagram and we actually read books? I think that would change a lot.
Yes.
But I think another part of it is that there are so many more books to choose from. I mentioned that I independently publish some of my stuff. A lot of people are doing that. So it used to be that the publishers were the gatekeepers for what was available to readers. And now, I mean, there's just millions and millions of options. So I think it's
Yes.
harder to be noticed and to get readers' attention amid all of the options and also all the noise on social media.
It's almost like you can't see the forest from the trees when it comes to books these days. So how do you choose which books you're going to traditionally publish and which you're going to indie publish? Does it really kind of boil down to the traditional publishing company passed on this one? Or
So far, I have traditionally published everything first, and some of my stories went out of print. And so the ones that went out of print from a traditional publisher, those were the ones that I got the rights back to, and then I gave them a really good edit and got new book covers, and then I put those out independently. So up
gotcha.
until now, I've always gone to the traditional publisher first. But in the future, I can definitely see doing a hybrid situation. And as far as which books, I think I might ask a publisher if they're interested in a certain story. And if they're like, no, because somebody else is doing that, or we don't think readers will be interested in something set in that time period, then I'll say, okay, then I'll just do it myself. Because you have to sell so far fewer books as an independently published author to reach the same royalty level. So it's okay with me if I
Yeah.
don't sell as many, and I might still come out, better off for it. But I do
Yeah.
really, really appreciate like everything a traditional publisher does for me that I would have to do myself if I don't go through them. I
Yes.
appreciate them, and I appreciate the whole team. So I think there's great value in both avenues.
Yeah, and man, it can be stressful indie publishing a book. I experienced that on my last book release. It released in January. And I had an editor. You tell them up front, this is when I need it by, blah, blah, blah. You make all these arrangements. And then they had life issues, and they were like 2 months late getting my manuscript. So, yeah, there's a lot of variables in there. It can be very stressful. It
Yes.
does. I've never been traditionally published, but man, I can imagine you would very much appreciate everything that a traditional publisher does.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah, for sure. So, how long have you been writing?
I've been writing in some way, shape, or form ever since I could hold a pencil. I went to
Okay.
college with an English degree, and then I was an editor at a nonprofit, and then I did freelance journalism. My first book was nonfiction. It was Devotions for Military Wives. That came out in 2008. And since then, I've just been writing, writing, writing. My first novel came out in 2012. So it's been a while.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. How did you get connected with Dr. Chapman? That's amazing. He's like a big name
I
author. Tell us a little
know.
bit about that. How'd that happen?
Yes, it is amazing. So my first book was with Moody Publishers, and that was Faith
Okay.
Deployed: Daily Encouragement for Military Wives. And then we did a second Faith Deployed again, more devotions for military wives. And then I was contracted to do fiction with Moody, but they wanted a military angle, and I love history, so I suggested a Civil War series. So I did that for them, and it was in the middle of that series, they said, because Dr. Chapman also is a Moody author, they said Dr. Chapman wants to do a military edition, but would like someone with military connections, because I was a Coast Guard wife, to come alongside and, co-author it with him. Would you be interested? And after I finished pinching myself, of course, I said yes.
That's amazing. And I kind of had this conversation with Tracy Peterson and Kimberly Woodhouse last summer. How did that co-authoring dynamic work with you and him? Like, did you do the majority of the writing? How does that work with two authors?
Yep, great question. And I'm sure Kimberly and Tracy's answer was different. Fiction is different from nonfiction. They're good friends of mine. So in this case, I just went through his original 5 Love Languages book, and I circled like all of the little anecdotes of, stories of other civilian marriages. And I interviewed dozens of military couples to see if I could swap out the civilian examples with military marriage examples. So I did all of the interviews, I did all of the writing, and then I added a couple of chapters that are very specific to military marriage. And then when I sent it to Dr. Chapman, he basically just read what I did, and in some points I would put in brackets, Gary, do you want to add something here? And he would add a little bit of his magic. And then in the back, there was an FAQ section. And so I changed the questions to be more military marriage specific. And I had him answer all of those FAQs.
Oh, that is so cool. So for the listeners that may be in the military or know somebody in the military, tell them again, what's the name of that book?
So that book was the 5 Love Languages Military Edition, which is great for any branch of service.
Okay. So, and it's just available anywhere.
Anywhere. Yep. Anywhere.
All right. So let's talk a bit about, so you've been writing for a little while. Writing novels is a process that authors learn and improve in over time. So if you could boil down your career to maybe 1 or 2 things that you didn't know in the beginning that you know now, what are some of those things that you could talk about?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. Authors often think that the longer they write or the more books they have under their belt, the easier it gets. That's not necessarily true. And so I would say something I've learned is that if it feels hard, it's not because you're doing it wrong necessarily. It feels hard because it is hard.
Yeah.
And that just kind of takes some pressure off. And I don't want people to give up just because it's hard. Don't think this should be easier. It takes a lot of work. It's maybe 10% talent, 90% discipline. So stick with it. Just work hard. The other thing I would say, and I have written nonfiction and fiction, and in both cases, anytime I get stuck, I always get unstuck if I go back to the research and if I do more research. So I just think the better the research, the better the story. Whether you're telling someone else's story like a nonfiction or you're telling someone else's story through fiction, it just helps so much.
I think that's the key is don't stop. I know people personally that they've come up to me and they're really frustrated. They really want to write a book, but it gets hard and they quit. I said, you can't quit. You got to keep going. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And the rough draft for me is always terrible. Because I'm not really talking about it with people yet, not with my editors. So it's just full of self-doubt and mind games. But you have to finish. You have to finish a draft so that you can make it better. And you will just be so delighted with how much it changes and gets better.
Absolutely. And again, like you just said, the first draft more than likely is going to be trash. It's not going to be your representative of your best work. That's what self-editing, that's where that comes in. Do you have a preference on nonfiction or fiction? Do you love them both equally, or do you if you had your choice, would you choose one over the other?
I think at this point I would choose fiction. But I do enjoy both of them. Nonfiction is very refreshing to me after having written fiction for so many years now. With nonfiction, you just say what you want to say. You don't have to think about characters and plots and villains and storylines and all this stuff. It's just you can be very clear. It's just a different type of communicating. And there's a place for both of them. I think that I don't know if I've run out of things to say in a nonfiction format. I'm not a pastor. I don't have a doctorate. I don't know what else I could say in a nonfiction format that people would pay for. Yeah. But fiction, the opportunities, the possibilities are literally endless. So
they are.
And it's very exciting to build a world, and especially with historical fiction, to maybe shine light on a piece of history that maybe we've forgotten about, but can be so inspiring.
I kind of want to use that as a segue to go into the next question. I have just recently, just probably in the last year and a half, gotten into reading historical fiction. I used to absolutely hate historical fiction. But last year, it may have been the year before last, I had a reading goal for myself that I was going to start reading genres that I wouldn't normally read just to experience them, even if they wind up not being my favorite genre, if they wind up not being my favorite books. So that year, historical fiction was my goal. I was like, I am going to read 5 historical fiction novels. And do you know, by the time I was done with that year, I would rather read historical fiction than anything now. So
yay!
Yes,
so glad to hear that.
I have totally. Biblical fiction is my absolute favorite. I love biblical fiction. So that's kind of what I want to talk to you about. Since most of us were not alive during those times, how do you tap into an era that you weren't a part of? What's your process for that?
Right. Well, I have been fortunate that I've been able to travel to all of the locations that have served as my settings, which is great because there are so many resources that are online, on the web, but there's something about going to the place and going to the local historical archives and talking to local historians. So one of the reasons I like to do that, and I try to do as much online research as I can before I go there, so that when I go there, I try to fill in all the gaps in my research and also just experience the local culture, which obviously would have changed since, the time period of my story, but to feel the weather on my skin and see what it's like geographically and see what kind of trees and what kind of wildlife and all kinds of stuff.
What does the air smell like?
Yes, exactly. And I live in Iowa. It gets humid, but not as humid as New Orleans in the summer. So when I said a story in New Orleans, I had to go there and find out how much am I going to sweat? Like what was it like for my characters in all those layers of 18th century clothes? And then when I get home, if I have more questions, I can just call up or email those historian friends that I made or the librarian friends that I made in that location. Like, for instance, I went to Chicago a few different times because I had a series set there. And I knew that after the Great Fire of Chicago in 1871, the gas power, went out. Well, I needed to know, when did they get the gas working again so that they could have their lights come on again? Well, that kind of thing is really hard to find. Like maybe with ChatGPT now, it would be different. But when I contacted the historian that I had just met, she sent me the PDF of an article, like a very obscure article, within 5 minutes. So making friends with a person on location has just been a gold mine for me.
That's some great advice. So let's move into the book that we're here to talk about today. Again, it's called The Manhattan Confessions by Jocelyn Green. Do you have a copy of the book there with you?
I do.
Yeah, hold it up. Since we do both audio and visual, describe the cover for the listeners that are listening and not looking at us.
So the cover of this one shows the interior of the Great Hall of Ellis Island, the Great Immigration Center. And the figure, there's a young lady that we just see her from behind, and she's wearing 1920s jacket and a cloche hat, and she's got a bag. She's there all by herself, but actually in the story, she was never there all by herself. It was always just jam-packed with immigrants or would-be immigrants. But on the cover, there's also little Art Deco embellishments as a border and in the corners. But Yes, the three covers in this series have all been the interiors of buildings.
Yeah, and it's an amazing cover. I will tell listeners this book is book 3 in the series. Is this going to be a trilogy, or do you think will it go on further?
Yep, nope, this is the third and final book in the trilogy.
Okay, I read book 3 first, and I read it just fine without the benefit of having read books 1 and 2. You see people all the time asking, "Well, do I have to read the rest of the series to read this one?" I'm a big proponent of read the series in the order they were written. I had no trouble following it. Do you tell people that they can read these as standalones?
I do. I mean, I think they're more fun and more meaningful if you do read all of them, but I wouldn't want you to skip reading one of the books if you don't want to read the other ones. I don't want you to skip it altogether.
Yeah. Are there any crossover characters or anything that sort of ties the 3 books together?
Yes, definitely. So the 3 books are the stories of 3 young ladies who live together in the same apartment, and they work in 3 different institutions on Central Park. The name of the series is On Central Park. So the first book, The Metropolitan Affair, the protagonist is a curator of Egyptian art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Her cousin, Elsa, is one of her roommates, and Elsa's story is the Hudson Collection, which is book 2. Elsa is an ornithologist. She does work in a Gothic mansion outside of Manhattan. And then the third roommate is Ivy, and that's the young lady whose story we have in the Manhattan Confessions. She works as a librarian at the New York Historical Society. So you do get to see the roommates in all 3 books, except for Lauren. She does go to Egypt for an expedition, so she's kind of off the page.
All right. A lot of the historical fiction books I've read, they tend to be prairie style books. It kind of as the country was first developing. So I really enjoyed this book in that it took place in the 1920s. New York is established. I think it's real interesting to see how life was for people in the 1920s. This was a little bit unique for me in historical fiction.
Good. And I feel the same way. I live in Iowa. It would make sense for me to write prairie books, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like that's been done so well by other authors who are known for that. And so I really do like to try to find angles of historical fiction that the market isn't already saturated with. Although I did write a Civil War series, and one could argue that's been done enough, but
Yeah.
I wanted to do that anyway. So
Well, hey, I mean, people tend to get stuck in their little niche that they like. You know, they only like Regency or they only like whatever. So for people that love Civil War style books, boy, they will grab at anything that comes out, even if it's something that's similar to what they've already read. So, yeah, I say go for it.
good.
Take us into the book. Tell us a little bit about the Manhattan Confessions.
Sure. Well, I mentioned Ivy is a librarian at the New York Historical Society, and one of their projects was to collect reminiscences, recollections of the older folks. How was New York City during the Gilded Age? And most people were submitting written things, but there was one woman who was willing to share her story anonymously, but she didn't have the strength to write it herself, so she dictated this to Ivy. And after this story was printed in a bulletin of the New York Historical Society, people were just fascinated with it. And a couple people said, I think I have a connection with this woman. And it was so interesting because this woman, who is now one of society's grand dames, she was actually an Irish immigrant, and she had to enter into crime with her younger brother in order to survive. She ended up, and I'm not really giving much of the story. You find this out very early on in the story, so I don't consider this a spoiler.
Yeah, we're going to be very careful, listeners, to not give any spoilers because we want people to experience this on their own way. Yes.
That's right, we do. But she ended up doing things that she would not recommend, not very nice, Christ-honoring things in order to get out of this this gang world that she wanted to extricate herself. So the fact that she went from being part of this Irish gang to now being who she was just kind of a bombshell on New York society. And now Ivy is the one holding the secret of this woman's true identity. And then when a couple of guys come into the story and they're like, I need to talk to her. This is why, this is life and death. She doesn't know like how to handle it. And of course, this woman denies any kind of relationship. So that's one thread. And, the stakes go higher and higher. But the other thread.
I really enjoyed that thread. Especially when it came to, what was the lady's name who the story that she was telling her story? Adeline. That was very interesting. It gave just a little bit of suspense to it. This is not a suspense book. It's not categorized as, but it did give just a little bit of a suspense that it kept me on the edge of my seat, wanting to know what was going to happen next. So
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, I hope readers will enjoy getting to know Adeline. I really wanted to have an older person character, so now we have Adeline. The other part of Ivy's story is that she's an orphan. She had a cousin over in Milan, Italy, and finds out that she's immigrating to America. Very wonderful surprise to have family once again. But once Gina gets to Ellis Island, they discover that she doesn't have all of the paperwork that she needs. And so she's being detained. And, people could be detained for months and months. They could eventually be deported. And 1926, Italy, this was the time of Mussolini, and she would be in great danger if she went back because Gina's father had owned a newspaper which printed opposition opinions against fascism and Mussolini, so she just could not go back. So Ivy is trying to work with an Immigration Services Bureau to get what she needs, and then discovers that, oh gosh, Brett, what do I do? I don't know how to explain this without spoiling it, but it's all is not what it seems to be, which I guess you could say about every single novel in the world. But the stakes keep getting higher and the risks are higher and the danger is higher, and she doesn't know if she's going to be able to help her cousin.
Yeah. Oh, guys, this is such a fun book. You really got to read it. One thing, now you'll have to forgive me because of the volume of books I have to read for this podcast. I have to read books usually a month or so before the date that we talk about it. Now, if I remember correctly, there was something in this that I read that I had never heard of. So I thought we might talk about that for a little bit. They went to like an automat cafeteria or something like that. I had never heard of that. Tell me about that.
Oh, this is a fun little thing. So this automat cafeteria, very popular. You would go into this cafeteria and they had little vending machines basically for whatever you would want to eat. Like if you see a plate of meatloaf, you just put in, I don't remember how much it was, like a dime, and then you pull out the meatloaf. If you want green beans, you put in a nickel and you pull out. So you just go along with your tray and you put the coins in the slots and you pull the food off. It is very popular for the middle class, for working people who had just a little bit of time for their lunch hour. So, I mean, that sounds fun to me.
That is so cool. So, like, and you may not know, like, did it dispense hot food? Like, if you got meatloaf, did it dispense hot food, or did you have to heat it up?
No, it was hot. And maybe maybe they were able to do that because of the volume of people coming through so quickly. It didn't have time to just cool.
Yeah. Well, I just thought that was so interesting. I wasn't alive in the 20s, obviously, but that felt very, like, modern for the 20s, So anyway, I loved that. So another thing that kind of stuck out to me is I'm an ardent fan of the Gilmore Girls. I would never have known what the DAR was without Gilmore Girls. Emily Gilmore was like the grande dame of the DAR in Connecticut. So for the listeners that may not know, the DAR does sort of have like a little thread through there. Tell the listeners kind of what the DAR is and what your affiliation with that organization is.
Sure. Yes. So the DAR is Daughters of the American Revolution. It is a national lineage society. So I am actually in my own Cedar Falls chapter, and the way that you get membership, you have to apply, you have to show proof of lineage back to someone who served in the American Revolution either as a Continental soldier or someone who provided aid to the Continentals. So, I mean, you have to show marriage certificates, birth, death certificates, all this stuff. The major pillars of the DAR, it is also a service organization. So it's education, historical preservation, and patriotism. So my character, Ivy, I mentioned she was an orphan, and she was really looking for a place to belong. And so she applied to this organization. She was accepted and inducted. And then she found out that there was an Ellis Island committee. So they do all kinds of great work in the community. And I everything that she did in the story with the Ellis Island Committee, that really happened with one of the chapters in Manhattan. So they would go and provide scraps of fabric and notions so that all these women who had come from all these different countries and were being detained at Ellis Island had something to do during the day. They could sew, they could embroider, they could maybe cross stitch or work on lace, and whatever they made, they got to keep for themselves. And it's just so much better for people to have something to do with their hands while they're
Yes.
to not be idle while they're waiting, like what's going to happen, So that was one avenue I wanted to explore. That Ellis Island committee was just so interesting to me, and they did such good work.
Yeah. All right. So in the book, one of the characters regrets having killed somebody that was in the war. And the character says, "That man I killed in the war had a mother at home. His last words should have been to his mother, his father, his sibling, his friend, not to me." So I thought we'd talk about this because I thought that was a kind of an interesting conundrum. So what are your thoughts on people who are forced to make impossible decisions of possibly taking someone's life, whether they break into your home, whether it's in a war, or like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's a time when you can take someone's life? We know the Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill." We're not talking about malicious murder here, but when it comes to instances like that, what do you think? Are there times when it's justified?
Yes, like in a word, yes, I do. I
I
mean,
agree.
you might pick that up from the fact that I was a military wife and have connections with the military. Um, we always want to solve things diplomatically first, but I think in a situation of self-defense, I mean, maybe if it's self-defense, if it's possible to neutralize the threat without killing the person, that would be
Yes.
preferable. But we do have war, and I do appreciate the terrible toll that takes on our soldiers. And I think the character you mentioned, Tom, I don't think that he had a philosophical opposition to war when he signed up for it. He was not a pacifist, but I think there was he's a tender soul. And
He
I think there
is.
was something about when it became so personal, like if you're shooting into a bunch of people, like as the enemy, it's not as personal, but when there's someone right in front of you, and if he kind of looks like you, if you
Yeah.
have a
And you
face to the
know
enemy.
you did that. I know I did that. Yeah.
Yes, like even if Tom knew in his mind that he did what he had to do, I think that something just kind of broke inside him to realize like the personal cost that war has for both sides. No
Yes.
matter what the thing is that you're fighting for, it costs so much. And, different personalities and different um, things that happen in people's childhood, people handle that differently. Not everybody comes home from war with PTSD who may have had the same experience. This particular character did. he came home with PTSD, and he's been kind of working through that. And of course, in the 1920s, you didn't call it that, but yeah, he had a really hard time.
Yeah. Well, and I've read stories, I'm sure we all have, of people that they had PTSD from being put in a position to have to take someone's life. I can't imagine being in that position. As soon as I read that in the book, it like put me in a position to be like, how would that make me feel? And I like it when books kind of make me pause and go, So did you include that for that reason, or was that just...
I think when I write a story, I like to make people think and just reflect, because it's easy to be like, this person is all good, this person is all bad. It's a black and white decision all the time. But it's not. There are nuances and complexities. And I think one of the greatest things about fiction is that you are able to step into somebody else's shoes and mind and see things in a different way and just be like, oh, that's where that person is coming from. And hopefully that can translate when we see somebody in our own lives that maybe like we are very, very different. We don't have their life experience, but maybe we can just pause and think, maybe this type of thing is going on and that's why they're behaving that way.
And that's kind of what I think of as I'm writing my characters. Some bad guys have just a little bit of good in them, and some good guys have that makes complex characters. Very few people are all bad or all good. So yeah,
Very
love
true.
that. Another thing I want to go into that we encountered in the book was revealing and keeping secrets was a theme in the book. So let's talk about that a little. Do you think there are secrets that are best kept?
Yeah, probably. Especially if it's not my secret to tell.
Yes.
If
Agreed.
it's not my secret to tell, then maybe I shouldn't know about it, and I certainly shouldn't share it. There are some things that we wouldn't tell our children because the thing is too big for them to handle at the moment. So is that really keeping a secret? I don't know. I would like to think of it more as just being discerning and having discretion in what we share and when. So without getting into too many specifics, yes, I'm sure there are situations where we would not divulge absolutely everything that we know with anybody.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it's okay to just keep your mouth shut and go on.
Yeah. And you can always open your mouth again later if you're like, oh, I probably should. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I just thought that was a very interesting, again, that's one of those things that made me go, So tell us, what are some of the ways that your characters use their faith to overcome adversities in their lives?
Well, there has to be a lot of trust in this story. There are, times of waiting. There's a lot of things that Ivy is trying to fix, but there are things that are not within her control. And I think that translates to all of us as well. Like we can be obedient as far as something is up to us, but at some point we're just going to have to wait and trust and see what God does.
And sometimes that's the hard part.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It is hard. It is hard. And because we don't know how long the waiting will last. And it's tempting to be like, well, I've waited for X amount of time and my problem hasn't resolved. That must mean God isn't working on it. Well, no, that's not what it means, but it's tempting to think that in our humanness.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Now you were about to go into something about Tom. Do you remember what you were going to say?
Yes. So I think Tom was the character that we were talking about earlier who struggled coming home from World War I. And he had PTSD, and he had to kind of learn how to forgive himself for what he had to do, and also to be courageous and put himself in a position and reconnect with someone who came from a stage of life that he really preferred to forget. So, and again, that required more trust and more courage and more bravery.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So for people that are theme readers, can you nail down a theme or two that readers might be interested in hearing about?
Yeah, sure. So keep in mind that this took place in the 1920s in Manhattan. This was a time of prohibition. And I don't know, I didn't know this. Maybe some of your listeners did, but a lot of immigrants were also smuggled into the country on the same routes that were used for alcohol. Immigrant smuggling was a big thing in the 1920s because our government enacted these quota acts that drastically reduced the number of immigrants from a lot of countries. Britain was okay, but Italy, for example, we thought that we had enough Italians, and so we just about choked off. And there was a fear of too many immigrants making our country un-American. And so this theme of what does it mean to be American? And, you know, we have Gina, the immigrant who does come over from Italy, and she's still dealing with the after effects of watching fascism unfold in her country. So, yeah, what does it mean to be an American? And Ivy is in The Daughters of the American Revolution, and there are some ladies in the DAR who were wonderful, warm people, and there are some people who really were not thrilled about more Italians coming over and what that meant. So, yeah, I think that would be. And and identity, like we're talking about Adeline and her past kind of catching up to her. So the whole theme of how much does our past affect our present and our future? Can we ever really bury it? Will it stay buried? And how much can we change our trajectory of our lives? Like, we're born into a certain situation. How much agency do we have to change that for ourselves? Or how much is just the hand that we were dealt?
Yeah, that's so good. We're going to start wrapping this up. So again, it's called The Manhattan Confessions by Jocelyn Green. I believe it releases this coming Tuesday, April 7th. Is that correct?
Yes, right.
Yeah. Oh, release day is so fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Will you do anything special? Do you like go have dinner with the family or?
Yep. Usually we go out to eat. It's more fun now because when the kids were little, we had to go to a place with a place, you know, like Burger King or Chick-fil-A with a playground. But we can do a little better than that nowadays.
You can be a little sophisticated now.
Yes.
Oh, good.
It can be a little bit more for mom than for the kids.
Yeah. You finally get to this is about me, not you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So is there anything else about the book you wanted to say before we start wrapping things up?
I think you did a great job, Brett. I can't think of anything else. I hope it was
good.
enough to intrigue readers to dive into the 1920s in Manhattan and see what the story's all about.
I highly recommend this book. As soon as I read this one, I immediately went and bought the Kindle book for book one. Tell them again, what's book one and book two called?
Book one is called The Metropolitan Affair, and book two is The Hudson Collection, and the whole series is called On Central Park.
Okay. Before we go, tell us a little bit about the Windy City series. That one sounds intriguing to me, so I think that one's one I'm going to dig into once I'm done with this series.
Oh, good. I love that series. So that is it's a family saga that takes place in Chicago. The first book is Veiled in Smoke. It is about the Great Fire of Chicago of 1871 and the aftermath. 1871 was not that long after the Civil War. So one of the characters was, he was the father of the main character who had spent some time in Andersonville. And when the fire comes along, it triggers a bunch of stuff. I won't go too much into it. The next book in the series is called Shadows of the White City. It's set in 1893, the Chicago World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition. And so there's a lot of intrigue. If you've read Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, that's a nonfiction book, you know that America's first serial killer would pick off girls from the Chicago World's Fair. I do not have a serial killer in my book, in case you're curious and worried. I don't go that dark.
I would be in if you did. I'm just saying.
There is worry about it, but there is not. The third book in the series is called Drawn by the Current. It's set in 1915, and it's about the Eastland disaster, which don't feel bad if you have no idea what that is. I'll tell you. There was a steamship full of 2,500 people tied to the dock in the Chicago River right downtown. And before it even left the dock, it tipped over, and 844 people lost their lives, which is just insane. So my main character was on that ship, and she was a life insurance investigator. So after the disaster, her job was to get death claim benefits rolling, but there's also cases of mistaken identity with some of the victims. So there's a lot there. But all three of those books are focused on three of the most historic milestones in Chicago history. And that was so much fun to write because that was in my backyard, basically.
Oh, okay. Okay. Plot twist here. Drawn by the Current. I bought that paper book on Christian Book Distributors last year.
Ooh.
And I haven't read it yet. I didn't realize until just now that you wrote that book. For some
fun.
reason, yeah, it's got like a white cover on it, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. The reason I bought that book, because on this podcast, in addition to author interviews, we also do full-length book discussions. That's one we're going to do at some point. We're going to do a full-length book discussion on that. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so when we do that, I'll shoot you an email and let you know so you can check it out. So usually the way we do those, we do like heavy discussions on the book. And then once we get to a certain point in the book, we do a spoiler zone to where people that they know they're going to read a book, they can leave. So that's one of the books we're going to do on the podcast probably in the next few months. Yeah.
That just makes my day. I love that story. So thank you.
You're welcome. So you're going to pop back up on the podcast. Who knows? Once we do that, I may contact you. Do you want to come on and maybe for 15 or 20 minutes and talk about that book, sort of as a supplemental video? So we'll reach out to you when that time comes, and at the very least, maybe we'll just do a little short supplemental video about you talking about that book. So, all right. What are you reading right now? I love hearing what other authors are reading.
Yes, so I am reading Whispers at Painswick Court by Julie Klassen. And I'm also reading, she's Christian Regency. I just did a book signing with her 2 days ago in Minneapolis. That was really fun. I'm also reading The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton, which came out a while ago. It's general market fiction. It's set in it's about like the Dutch Golden Age and this dollhouse that is a replica of her real house. So it was like a huge bestseller, award winner many years ago, and I'm catching up. So
fun. Do you predominantly read historical fiction? Do you ever branch into modern, contemporary?
I do. I mean, historical fiction is my first love, but I do read some contemporary fiction. Katie Powner, I love her books so much. Oh, I'm always so happy to read her books. And then if I want something lighter, like a rom-com, like I don't really do romance, but rom-com is fine. Becca Kinzer, who's with Tyndale, is hilarious. So I do branch out sometimes.
Oh, okay. Fun to branch out sometimes.
Yes.
Have you heard of Kelly Stewart, author Kelly Stewart?
Yes.
She's published by Revell, I think. I'm reading a book of hers now, The Master Craftsman. Have you read that?
I haven't read that one yet. But I read others, including Like a River from Its Course, which was really good. But she's a great author.
Okay. I had never heard of her before. I think I found this book at Mardell. It is so good. It's about Fabergé, the
Yep.
egg maker. You know, he made these eggs for the Romanovs, and he was just a master jewelry maker. And the book is about there's this one final. I think Fabergé created 52 for the Imperials, and there's one last egg that was never put out there, and so it's kind of like a treasure hunt. It is so
Treasure.
good. Yeah,
Oh, good.
I love books that sort of go into actual historical figures or actual things that happened. Now, I don't know that there was an actual unreleased egg or anything, but I was going to tell you, if you've never read her, that's a fantastic book. I'm probably about 100 pages from being done, and then that'll be
boy.
coming up. We're doing a full book discussion on that one coming up,
Great.
probably in the next month or so. So yeah,
Good.
okay. So what's your favorite book of all time?
Oh man, aside from the Bible, right? It's hard to pick a favorite, so I will tell you
It is.
the two books that I have read multiple times, which is not normal for me. Okay, I'm going to tell you one, I guess. Flight of the Sparrow by Amy Belding Brown.
Oh, okay.
That is a historical fiction based in the late 1600s about a real woman who is taken captive by Native Americans and then returned to her Puritan village and what that was like. That was amazing. And then, Peace Like a River by Leif Enger. So good. The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. I love even more than Anne of Green Gables. So, okay, there's three. I could keep going, but there's three.
I'm impressed that you could name three because I'm like you. I read so many books, and my favorite book this week, if you ask me next week, it may be a totally different book.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
I think one of my top reads, I read Redeeming Love for the first time last year. And we
did
talked
you?
about
Okay.
it on the podcast. That was at the time when I hadn't fully developed my love of historical fiction yet. And so I was really not looking forward to that. But one of my co-hosts, she really wanted to read that book. By the time we were done with that book, I was absolutely in love with it. So I think that book may have been what kind of pushed me into my love of historical fiction. So yeah, I think right now that's probably one of my favorites if I had to pick one. Yeah. So
That's a good
if you
one.
could sit down and talk to one person, living or dead, who would it be?
One person or
Yeah.
one author? One person?
Yeah, one person. Or yeah.
Abraham Lincoln.
Okay. He would be
Yeah.
interesting to talk to.
Yeah, he would
All
be.
right. Yeah. There's so many interesting people in the world.
There
So
are.
before we get off here, can you give us just a little bit of a hint about what are you working on now? What's coming up next?
Well, your guess is as good as mine.
Oh, really?
I am not on a contract right now. My son is
Really?
heading into his senior year, and so I'm just kind of taking a sabbatical year. But I'm actively
Okay.
researching story ideas. So I don't know. It'll be something historical, probably not set in the 1900s. I'm hoping that it'll be set in the 16 or 1700s next time, but I don't know yet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be looking forward to that. What are the chances that you'll ever write anything contemporary? Do you think you'll always stick in the historical fiction realm?
Chances are slim to none. But I
Okay.
used to say that about writing fiction at all. So who knows what life will bring, but I would prefer, I think, to stick with historical fiction at this point.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So tell listeners if they want to go online and look you up, if they want to, follow you on social media, or tell them where they can go and find you.
Well, the easiest starting place would be my website, which is jocelyngreen.com. And from there, you can find links to social media. If you go to Amazon, or Goodreads or BookBub, just look up my name. So yeah, jocelyngreen.com is the best place to start.
All right. So everybody go check her out. Again, the book we talked about today is The Manhattan Confessions. Highly recommend it. Go check that out. If you guys want to follow us, we have a podcast presence on pretty much all the major podcast platforms, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio. You can follow us on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We do have a presence on TikTok. I will say, if you want to reach out to me, do not do it through TikTok. I literally post our little clips of the podcast and leave the site because I absolutely loathe TikTok. But we are there if anybody's on TikTok. Jocelyn and I are here. We're just waiting on you guys to come and find us and be friends with us. So, all right. Do you have any parting words, Jocelyn, before we get out of here?
Just thank you so much, Brett, for reading the book and for wanting to spend time with me this morning. And thank you for those of you who are still listening. So it's always great to meet new readers. So if you've never heard of me, I'm delighted to meet you now.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for taking the time to come on. I know Saturdays are busy days for us because that's the day that we catch up after working all week.
Sure.
So I appreciate you for doing that. Listeners, we thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.